Yellow vests. On the 17th of November 2018, France saw the sudden eruption of the Yellow Vests movement. More than 280,000 people across the country donned high-visibility yellow vests, a common item in cars to block roads, occupy traffic circles, and march against President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise fuel taxes. What began as a reaction to energy policy quickly grew into weekly demonstrations, known as Actes, centered in Paris, where peaceful marches coexisted with episodes of violent unrest. The spark was the carbon tax, intended to promote climate goals, but placing a financial burden on working-class people in rural and suburban areas who relied heavily on cars. This, combined with feelings of being abandoned by Paris, regional inequalities, the government's repeal of a wealth tax, and Macron's image as a president of the elite. Together, these grievances ignited a crisis of trust in the political system. Unlike traditional movements, the Yellow Vests were decentralized, organized primarily through social media, with no formal leaders. By late 2018, Paris became the flashpoint. On December 1, the Arc de Triomphe was vandalized. Cars and shops were set on fire. In what was described as the most serious unrest in the capital since 1968, the government first suspended and then cancelled the fuel tax increase, but the Actes continued throughout 2019. Repeated clashes led to thousands injured by rubber bullets and tear gas. Official figures reported 11 people dead and more than 4,000 injured, while the economy suffered losses estimated in the billions of euros. Under pressure, President Macron announced a series of concessions, cancelling the fuel tax increase, raising the minimum wage by 100 euros per month, exempting overtime from taxes, rolling back social tax hikes on low-income pensioners, and launching the great national debate to directly hear citizens' views. Still, deeper demands, such as reinstating the wealth tax or holding citizen-initiated referendums, went unmet. The long-term impact of the movement was significant. It forced the government to adjust redistribution policies and shift from a hardline approach to one of listening to the people. Politically, it influenced the 2019 European elections, where Marine Le Pen's party overtook Macron's alliance. More broadly, it exposed a deeper crisis of representative democracy, as many citizens felt institutions no longer reflected or protected their interests. Culturally, the Yellow Vest transcended its original purpose to become a global symbol of grassroots protest. The slogan, Fin du monde, fin du mois, même combat, the end of the world and the end of the month, the same struggle linked environmental justice with social justice. The imagery of the Yellow Vests entered cartoons, documentaries, academic studies, and, in French social history, the movement is often compared to May 1968, a spontaneous uprising of ordinary people that left a lasting imprint on collective memory as a moment of anger and a demand for fairness in the early 21st century. Euromaidan. The Euromaidan movement began on the 21st of November 2013 in Kyiv's Independence Square after President Viktor Yanukovych unexpectedly suspended the signing of an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia. At first, it consisted of peaceful student demonstrations calling for European integration, but it soon expanded into a nationwide political and social movement, culminating in what is often called the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. The backdrop was a complex mix of economic and political pressures. Yanukovych's decision came as Russia increased its influence, while the EU had not offered a sufficiently attractive aid package. Beneath this were deeper issues: long-standing corruption, the dominance of oligarchic groups, and the aspiration of many Ukrainians to move closer to European democratic standards. Social media and civil society organizations played a crucial role. After only a few Facebook calls to gather, thousands arrived at Maidan, transforming the square into the heart of the movement. By late November 2013, police crackdowns on young protesters sparked widespread outrage, drawing larger crowds. Throughout the winter of 2013-2014, the square became a city within a city, with tents, barricades, and volunteer defense groups. In January 2014, the passage of laws viewed as restricting assembly escalated tensions, leading to violent clashes. Between February 18 and 20, casualties surged. On February 21, under international pressure, a reform agreement was signed. Yet, just a day later, President Yanukovych fled Kyiv, and parliament voted to remove him, marking the collapse of his government. The immediate aftermath saw a transitional government formed, policy shifts enacted, and controversial security units disbanded. However, geopolitical tensions rose quickly. Russian forces appeared in Crimea, where a referendum was held in March 2014, leading to annexation by Russia. At the same time, separatist conflicts broke out in Donetsk and Luhansk, igniting a prolonged war in eastern Ukraine. In the long run, Euromaidan reshaped Ukraine's trajectory. The country signed the association agreement with the EU, pushed reforms, and strengthened its national identity in a more European direction. Yet this shift also deepened its strategic confrontation with Russia, becoming a defining factor in regional security and a precursor to later developments. The key lesson often cited is that civil society can bring about institutional change, but making those changes sustainable requires persistent reforms. Moreover, a strategic realignment by a state in a geopolitical buffer zone can provoke forceful reactions from neighboring powers. Today, Euromaidan is remembered as the Revolution of Dignity. February 20 is observed as the Day of Remembrance of the Fallen, and November 21 as the Day of Dignity and Freedom. Monuments, museums, and renamed streets in Kyiv and beyond commemorate a historic turning point, the end of the post-Soviet phase and the start of a new democratic chapter, positioning Ukraine at the center of East-West dynamics in the 21st century. Belarus. In August 2020, Belarus entered one of the most turbulent periods in its modern history. The presidential election on August 9 declared Alexander Lukashenko in power since 1994, the winner with over 80% of the vote. Instead of reaffirming legitimacy, the result ignited the largest protests the country had ever seen. The opposition, led by Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, denounced the election as fraudulent and called on citizens to take to the streets, turning Minsk and other cities into the focal points of a political crisis. Discontent had been building for years. After more than 2 decades of rule, Belarus faced a stagnant economy, entrenched corruption, and a heavily restricted civil society. The COVID-19 pandemic deepened frustrations, as Lukashenko was criticized for downplaying the virus and ignoring public health measures. In the run-up to the vote, several male opposition candidates were arrested or forced into exile, leaving a space that 3 women standing together came to symbolize. Their image side by side quickly became a powerful emblem of defiance. Immediately after Election Day, tens of thousands poured into the streets. Security forces responded forcefully, using rubber bullets, stun grenades, and mass arrests. More than 7,000 people were detained within days. Yet, instead of quelling dissent, the crackdown fueled it. Across Belarus, women dressed in white and holding flowers formed peaceful human chains, sending a strikingly different message. Meanwhile, workers at major state-owned factories went on strike, and on August 16, an estimated 200,000 people marched in Minsk, an extraordinary moment in the country's recent history. Still, the street movement was not enough to shift the balance of power. The opposition's coordination council was swiftly neutralized, as most leaders were arrested or forced into exile. Tsikhanouskaya herself fled to Lithuania. In the following weeks, at least 4 protesters lost their lives, hundreds were injured, and testimonies emerged of mistreatment in detention centers. The government launched a sweeping crackdown on civil society. Hundreds of NGOs were shut down, independent media outlets dismantled, and more than 800 individuals were recognized as political prisoners. Internationally, the EU, the US, Canada, and the UK imposed sanctions, while Russia stepped in with financial aid, media support, and promises of security assistance. The contrast underscored Belarus's precarious position in a tense geopolitical arena. Though the 2020 movement did not achieve its aim of changing the government, it marked a turning point. It showed that Belarusian society had become politically awakened, ready to voice collective demands more forcefully than at any time in decades. Despite repression, civic consciousness and aspirations for independence took root, forming the foundation for future struggles. The images that remain in collective memory include women in white holding flowers, the historic white flag waving over Minsk, and protest songs like Kochu Perimin, I Want Change, ringing through summer nights. These symbols were banned at home, but spread widely among the Belarusian diaspora. For many, the summer of 2020 is remembered as an unfinished revolution, but one that awakened an entire nation.